for approximately 10 to 12 minutes. And Eric, the same, and we want to leave enough room for questions, so feel free to put your questions in the chat. We'll get to the chat at the end. So Keith, without further ado, Keith Loris from Sales Renewals. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just getting some of the details working here. Thank you very much. Put this into full screen. All right, so thank you for joining us this afternoon. Eric and I are going to share some thoughts we have, some things you might want to consider to adapt your business and marketing. I'm going to be talking about, he's going to be talking about commercial leasing strategies, adapting them for this new normal. I want to start with a couple of commercials to show you how pervasive this is. This particular one was pretty popular. You might have seen it. There's a link at the bottom of the slide that will take you to actually watch it. In interest of time, I'm not going to actually play these first two. But, you know, this is a commercial. It's basically a commercial from Ford pitching their contactless selling, you know, order the car online, they drop the keys off and so on. And that's the main message. But actually, in preparing for the practicum, I noticed the very last scene in the commercial, you see in the lower right, the woman is looking at her sleeping baby in the crib. And I realized that underlying the whole thing was a safety message, right? Which I thought was very interesting. So very big company, contactless selling and safety message. Here's a Pizza Hut commercial. It's a pretty typical Pizza Hut commercial. Again, you can click the link at the bottom to see it. But interesting twist on it is as the guy is pulling the pizza out of the oven and sliding it into the box, the voiceover says, once it leaves our 400-degree ovens, the only person who touches your pizza is you. And to emphasize that, they even put a nice little sticker on the box. So clearly, it's a food safety message, right, is what they're doing. And this is obviously a national, very big company. And so I wanted to show you the next one. This is from a local real estate broker here in Concord, Mass. And what their approach, this is a TV commercial also, they're taking a key sales step for residential brokers, the house tour, and they're trying to virtualize it so they can actually do business today.
I'm Laurie Cadigan, CEO and owner of Barrett Sotheby's International Realty. If you're like many who still have a need to buy or sell a home during these trying times, please visit barrettsir.com and take a virtual tour of properties that are on the market or coming soon to the market in the greater Boston area. You can take a full walkthrough, play a curated tour, move through a three-dimensional dollhouse layout and floor plan on your phone or computer right from your own home. I hope you and your loved ones stay safe and healthy.
So I really wanted to contrast that. I mean, this is not just the realm of big companies, right? This is a local broker with this kind of a commercial.
I'm Laurie Cadigan.
It's also not just messaging and positioning that's changing. COVID-19 is turning out to be a pretty good disruptor at many things, right? And so there's a recent New York Times story, again, that link will bring you there, that all of a sudden, you know, name brands, the Westons of the world, might have an advantage of Joe down the street, the Airbnb host, in terms of perceived ability to better clean their rooms, sanitize their facilities, right? So all of a sudden, the disrupted maybe is being disrupted, right? And then take the category online shopping. That seemed to be really quite stable, but amazingly, Instacart is beating Amazon in groceries right now. Target and Walmart, who admittedly had spent a lot of money prior to COVID to set this up, developing an online channel, they grew substantially more than Amazon did the last 2 months. So, you know, even the tried and true and even the gorilla Amazon, there's some flux there all of a sudden, right? So lots of things are changing. So what do you want to think about, right? How should you think about how should you adapt the business and marketing strategies for some of these things? Of course, this whole talk is a little bit crystal ball, a little bit expertise, a little bit hypotheses and so on, but I think there's a lot of good thought behind it. So I'm going to go through 7 points. The first one is something you can be doing right now. And this came up actually a lot in the USA 500 meetings. Basically, it's do the right thing, right? How many Zoom meetings was I in where people were bemoaning their big bank and their PPP loan and they couldn't get any information? And I'm leaving Bank of America. I'm going to go to my local bank, right? So that's something to think about, let alone if you're price gouging, if you're not willing to be flexible on payment terms with your clients and so on. All right, so this is a lesson learned. Do the right thing so you don't get punished later. Eric's going to have some more examples, by the way, about this specifically for real estate. A really important belief we have is that we're going to need to rigorously enforce the scientific and medical recommendations. So much so that I would argue that this is a foundational business strategy that everything else is going to be built on. One of our employees, Tina, recently went to her local Dunkin' Donuts at the drive-thru, and the employee was wearing a mask, but she reached through and was handing the coffee in a gloveless hand. She was not wearing gloves. And it took Tina aback, right? She did take the coffee, though, I asked her. But, you know, play that scenario out. Let's say Tina got sick, and then she decided to blame on Facebook that Dunkin' Donuts store that she gave me COVID, right? You know, the Tylenol scare from the 80s, when some lunatic was actually injecting arsenic into Tylenol bottles, killed 7 people. Turns out that sickening or killing your customers is a way to quickly destroy your brand. It's probably marketing 101. In this case, Johnson & Johnson was able to salvage their multi-billion-dollar brand, but it cost them a lot of money that most small businesses don't have. So the lesson here is don't kill your customers, right? And really the issue there is enforce the recommendations. And there's another point on the next slide about this. This third point is something professional service firms are going to be very familiar with. Trust has always been a key element of your all marketing strategy, but we believe it's going to be even more critical for even more businesses, not just professional services. Because customers are going to vote with their feet. If they don't believe your claims that it's safe to do business with you, they're not going to come in. They're not going to buy from you, right? And just continuing that example, even if that Dunkin' Donut drive-thru employee was wearing gloves, I can't see into the kitchen. I have to trust the owner of that franchise is doing the right thing behind the scenes. And that's not limited to restaurants, that's limited to everything, all right? And another kind of related point, whether you agree with those recommendations or not, some people debate, do I really need the gloves, and was that really buying, and so on. Whether that's true or not, I would argue it doesn't matter, because it's an important signal. You're adhering to those things. It's an important signal to your customers and employees that your business is safe. Whether that person needed to wear gloves when she's handing the thing or not, the CDC says she should be wearing it. If you want to get employees to come back, they need to feel secure and so on. So signaling is sort of the flip side of this whole thing about this foundational health and safety strategy. By the way, there's an opportunity for the professional service firms on this call. As I said, you're all familiar with trust marketing. Well, here's an opportunity to share some of your experience with how you build trust and so on with your clients who maybe never thought about it before because they're not professional service firms. So there's an ability here to add some value beyond your direct service for you. Fourth point, most businesses, probably every retailer, needs to very quickly consider the range of contactless through minimal contact options. So the first one's getting a lot of press. It's kind of the obvious one, the Pizza Hut, the curbside delivery, the online ordering. The Zoom and virtual house tours, again, it's an example of virtualizing a sales process. And if you think about it, a Zoom call with 2 prospects and then a virtual house tour, it kind of pairs pretty well. It's not the same as being there, right, and doing it in person, but it's not that bad a proxy, and it lets your business keep going. And there's probably lots of other aspects of your sales process you could be thinking about. Another thing, drive-thrus people have historically thought of as really just sort of banks and fast food. That's what drive-thrus are today. But USA member Rickard Byrne posted on LinkedIn that they had a drive-thru signing. And since then, I've seen lots of other firms have done this too. But it raises a whole host of issues about, can I do it in my parking garage? Is it dark? Is it dingy? Is it like oil stains on the floor? Is that the right appearance? How am I going to organize this thing in the parking lot? It's a bunch of things you probably never thought about it to try and create drive-thru signings or drive-thru law firms. This drive-by art galleries is something I read over the weekend. That's a hashtag on Instagram. There are hundreds and hundreds of projects with drive-by art. And what galleries in LA are doing, that's an LA map, are they're basically virtualizing their gallery. They're putting their art out into the streets, and then between the hashtag and GPS, people can drive around and see the different art, right? So these last 2 are really kind of interesting. It leads us to our 5th point. The notions of client access and how you'd appear to clients is changing. It's not just necessarily the fancy conference room anymore. It's what's my drive-thru look like, right? And even the physical boundaries. I mean, these galleries are basically not virtualizing the sales process. They're virtualizing their business. They're putting it out into the streets, so to speak, right? So number 5 is a really interesting one and potentially a pretty profound one. I did, of course, want to talk a little bit about marketing. And, you know, initially when the thing first hit, most folks had this deer in the headlights. Oh, I got to cut my expenses and preserve everything. But over time, we're seeing companies coming back and increasing their marketing spend because you understand fundamentally, marketing is an investment in growing your revenue. And frankly, when times are easy and prospects are falling out of trees, you don't necessarily need marketing. When times are tough, like right now, it's hard to generate new business. That's exactly when you do need to do marketing. So a couple of thoughts on marketing in the new normal. Planning ahead, seeing trends is helpful. That's why Walmart and Target were prepared for that kind of growth. Again, that particular omni-channel strategy, e-commerce plus physical stores, that's not just big guys. We have lots of small clients with one store and an e-commerce site. But what that would have meant the last few months is you weren't dead in the water. You had some ability to sell and do some work. And some of our clients is exactly what they did. Again, for all businesses, we think self and health messaging and its related cousin signaling is going to be very critical right now. For professional service firms, we have a particular challenge because we rely so much on in-person marketing tactics. That's the way we generally generate business. So the old face-to-face networking events, seminars, trade shows where you look people in the eye, shake their hand, that's not coming back for a while. So we have to replace them with some new things. And frankly, USA 500 is a perfect example of sort of a new virtual networking, and that's done very, very well, right? You know, equal or better, some would argue, to the other kind of networking. Curated events is our own term for this notion of replacing big events, big trade shows with much smaller regional, so you don't have to fly anywhere, you could drive, in brand name locations so you feel like it's going to be safely maintained, and then a curated list. Instead of inviting thousands and 10,000 people to a trade show, invite the 20 decision makers or 200 thought leaders or whatever, right, as a way to do some of those curated events where you can control things and position them, not to position them, have them also be safer. A very critical thing, and this is independent actually of the disease itself. This also applies to just whether we're going to have a bad economy. I think it's very important for every company to try to shorten their time to first dollar. And in terms of professional service firms, I think that really means reevaluating their service mix. Most service firms have a single take it or leave it all-encompassing service. I'll pick on wealth managers as an example. I'm a wealth manager. I could become, you know, your wealth manager, right? Well, that's a really consequential decision. That's my retirement, that's my kid college, and so on. And so I don't jump into those decisions lightly. I really consider them a long time, and that's what results in very, very long sales cycles. People sit in your pipeline for years. So one strategy is to unbundle your services. We've done this quite a few with different clients who've been very successful. Unbundle your services so you can create tiered offerings that build on each other and provide a natural upgrade path. There's a lot of information in this graphic, but let me get across a couple of points. So what we're illustrating here with good, better, and best is sort of unbundling the monolithic battleship service and making it a tiered strategy. Importantly, the gradient here, the lower level ones are less dollars, less commitment, and therefore less time in your pipeline. Right? They're not a consequential decision for the prospects. Towards the top, it's more. So let's go back to that wealth manager example. Unbundle the battleship wealth management and spin out a specific financial planning service. Right? Now, one of the other nice things is that the things down here at the bottom of this pyramid tend to lend themselves much better to traditional lead generation marketing tactics. So while nobody is going to click an ad and choose a wealth manager from a Google online ad, they will, because we've done it, they will click an ad and sign up for a financial planning service that's X amount of money, right? Now, if you think about that, they're in your office, you're presenting the plan, you've gotten to evaluate the chemistry, hopefully you think you're really brilliant. It's a very natural progression for them to say, you know what, I like your plan, can I hire you to implement the plan? That's an example of what I meant by that natural upgrade path. You know, the good leads naturally into the better if you construct them correctly. You also get bonus points if your entry offering is a fixed price. So the financial plan is not some unpredictable price. It's how many hours it's going to take us to do it. It's X amount of money. You can even put that in the ad potentially if you wanted to, right? So this is something that is a way, especially between using the traditional lead gen tactics, between making it, coming up with offers that are easier to adopt because they're not as consequential. You can shorten the time to first dollar. So in summary, I want to just take a sort of a case study, a little summary there on the left for you, but imagine you're a restaurant owner. Your whole life, your goal was to have great tasting food, high quality service, get Michelin reviews. That's how you viewed your business, that's how you manage your business, that's how you marketed your business. Then COVID hits and the government says, forget all that. And they throw you into this world that's very tech heavy, online ordering and curbside pickup and all this stuff, which is probably not one of your strengths. And all of a sudden, now they're telling you soon it's going to be 25% occupancy, 50% occupancy. And now you got to do this hybrid business. You got to do the business that you've known all your years of in person. And now you can do this remote thing. And how do you fit all these things together? There's a lot of changes psychologically in the business strategy, the marketing strategy, lots of changes. So my contact info is there on the right. Feel free to reach out with any questions. We have helped clients do this day in and day out, not necessarily for COVID reasons, typically for internal business, want to change their business for this or that reason. But nonetheless, we're happy to talk with you. We're happy to send you copies of the presentation. So that's my half, and I've hopefully tried to make some broad points applicable to most industries. I'm going to turn it over to Eric now, who's going to talk about specifically sort of the case study, how might some of these things apply to real estate. Eric?
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. Let me see if I can figure this out here. Share. Let's see. Okay. Excellent. Can you see my screen, Keith?
Yes.
All right, good. Excellent.
You want to
Thank
click
you,
the
Lauren.
enable editing button, I think, up at the top in that yellow bar, Eric? And then go full screen.
I'm not seeing that.
It's at the top of the menu.
Well, you know what? I'm going to...
Well, try go to full screen, see if it works. Maybe it will.
I'm not able to do that. Sorry, folks. All right, so anyway, I just wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you, Keith, and welcome to friends and colleagues and guests. I'm Eric Blaha, as Jeremy pointed out. Jeremy, thank you for moderating today. So a quick thank you to USA 500 for having us participate in this practicum series. This is very exciting. So I'm going to be building today on Keith's piece about business marketing in the wake of COVID-19 and how it relates to the real estate industry. Keith gave some great examples of how people are adapting in the marketing of virtual property showings and virtual car sales and even drive-through closings conducted by lawyers. So that's, these are very creative things. And today we're going to talk a little, I'm going to dig down a little bit deeper and talk about leasing strategies in the wake of COVID-19. So there's a great deal of uncertainty, obviously, in the market, especially in the area of office space. There's a great deal of talk about evictions and even foreclosures and things of this sort. Obviously, there's safety concerns, health and hygiene. What are people doing in the common areas of their buildings? People are touching elevators. What's the deal with social distancing and bathrooms? The fundamental core of how we live our lives is being upset. But if you're in a lease situation and you're in an office space, the conversation quickly turns to the financial impacts. And for that, tenants are concerned because they're still under a lease obligation. There's a contract that requires them to pay on a monthly basis usually. So if they don't pay, even if they're hit hard by COVID, they may face eviction. On the other hand, landlords also are under pressure because they still have to pay their taxes, and they still have, if there's a mortgage, they still have to make their monthly loan installment. So if their tenants are not paying, then they may have difficulty meeting their monthly nut. So obviously,
Eric, I don't know if you realize that people are not seeing your deck.
No, I did not know that.
You're still on the first slide. I think you have to push that enable editing button in that yellow toolbar at the top in the middle of the screen.
Okay, I don't have a yellow toolbar at the top. Let me see here. Oh,
And then I think if you push the full screen, there we go.
all right. Screen. Okay, let's try this again. Better?
I can see the PowerPoint slide. Eric, try just changing one slide so we can make sure that we're seeing when you move slides. There we go. Yep.
Excellent. Sorry, folks.
You gotta love Microsoft Office.
Can you see this now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And now we see the build.
Okay. Is that a good thing?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So where did we leave off? Okay. So both tenants and landlords are vulnerable, and the old normal would be a knee-jerk reaction if there's a default situation, and a tenant is defaulting, and a landlord goes to his real estate professional, his lawyer, and what do? Well, the knee-jerk reaction is, of course, we litigate, take him to court. We're a landlord. We run the show here, but so what do? Then you start looking at the lease. There's force majeure clauses. Can a tenant escape liability for in the case of a catastrophe? So they're going to be scouring the lease, and again, this is what typically happens. A tenant may be thinking, "Oh my goodness, I've been prevented from performing. I can't use the space. I can't even get into this to use and occupy the space that I'm paying for. This has rendered it impossible for me to pay. Therefore, I have that legal argument." The problem here, folks, is people may not want to and may not have to get into the weeds anymore. Judges can't rewrite a contract. And if you want to face the uncertainty of going into a court and wondering whether the judge is going to enforce a force majeure clause or force the impossibility doctrine, our recommendation to clients who call, and we're getting a lot of calls, is to take advantage of what we call the pre-litigation window. Okay, you want to take the opportunities here, the uncertainty, and say, hey, you know what? We can avoid protracted litigation. We know that the judges are probably going to start focusing on tenants' rights. In fact, the pendulum has swung because just last year, New York passed the Tenant Protection Act, which already started the ball rolling in favor of tenants. And now with hardships faced by people who are facing the impacts of COVID, maybe judges are going to be even more sensitive to the plight of the tenant. So a savvy landlord may be interested in reconsidering his old ways. So the phased reopening now of New York and Massachusetts, fortunately numbers are declining in those communities. And that gives us an opportunity to revisit the way landlords and tenants react with each other. So first order of business is a tenant is ought to consider possibly fighting or flying, relocation. A tenant's got to consider the long-term space needs. Are tenants in densely packed cubicles now that they're coming back to work? Are they going to be concerned for their safety and well-being, and that they're going to be taking the virus from work and into their home? So maybe it makes sense to downsize or even move. Or on the flip side, maybe some companies are, the employees are adjusted to working at home, and maybe it hasn't impacted productivity negatively. So maybe there's less space needed. So a savvy tenant might consider bargain hunting, finding a landlord that is willing to negotiate, reduce costs. Maybe the tenants are willing to look for a new neighborhood, a new city, maybe even go to suburbia and a suburban office park. So this is all part of adjusting to the new normal. So what are the landlord's concerns? From the landlord's perspective, they have to face the fact that there's going to be less demand. Okay, we're telling our clients there's going to be less demand. You can't just kick your tenant out. You can, but if you do, that's the old normal, and you may be facing consequences. There's probably going to be reduction in values. New tenants are going to come in and looking for that bargain and reduced rent. The alternative is the space lays dormant, and you're getting no income. You might have the prospect of winning in court and having to face a possible collection 6 months, 12 months, 18 months away, but a landlord may need to pay bills right now. So a savvy landlord is going to recognize the tenant has leverage, and we're advising our clients on a case-by-case basis. So what should a landlord consider? Well, unfortunately, it gets right to the bottom line. A landlord really should consider making concessions. Any tenant that's going to start off with, hey, we're hit hard by COVID-19. Can you please forgive rent? Let us not have to pay rent. Well, I think that a landlord should consider that. And I have one example where I know that a tenant went to a landlord and the landlord simply said, okay, half your rent is free for the next 3 months, pay only half of your rent, and I will forgive that rent. And I think that sends a very strong message. I mean, I think Keith was talking about signaling before. I don't know if he meant it as between landlord and tenant, but if a landlord tells a tenant, hey, you don't have to pay rent or half the rent for a couple of months, that tenant is going to be happy. That income is going to be made. That tenant's going to try extra hard to maintain that good relationship for the long term. Alternatively, a landlord might consider rent forbearance. That is making an exception for the monthly rent, not necessarily forgiveness, but maybe use half the deposit towards rent. In fact, New York just recently passed actually the governor of New York passed an executive order by which if a tenant goes to the landlord and says, I want to apply my security deposit towards this month's rent, the landlord actually has to abide by that request. But there are other ways to be creative. Maybe take a block of 3 months now and maybe put that 3-month obligation at the end of the term, or maybe bundle that 3-month rent and then allow the tenant to pay it out over 12 or 36 or some other period of time, 12 or 36 months. So again, we're suggesting our landlords be creative. In addition, a landlord may think about giving allowances. This is instant gratification, instantaneously making your tenant happy. And it may not cost that much money. Allowances, physical allowances. Let a tenant, maybe the tenant's been talking about new carpeting, new painting, new lighting. Maybe there are vendors who provide carpeting and lighting and things of this sort that would make a deal with you, cutting a deal in the wake of COVID-19. So there's maybe a whole new conversation that's going on here. Also, maybe to appease concerned tenants and their employees, maybe even offer discounted cleaning services. So there's a lot that a landlord can do, maybe not at a great cost. By the way, the example that I gave about half of rent forgiveness for 3 months, if you think about it, that's just about 10% of a discount for a full year. Okay, that half of a month rent for 3 months, if at a discount of 10%, is it worth it for a landlord possibly to make that discount, to make a tenant very happy and make a tenant feel that they're in it with you? Anyway, so what's the tenant's perspective? Obviously, a tenant's going to look for short-term relief if they're being hit by the COVID virus, and they're going to be asking for, well, let's see, what did we just tell the landlord? Rent forgiveness or rent forbearance. Those are money issues, and certainly a tenant is going to ask for those reductions or discounts. But in addition, we're suggesting that tenants get creative within the lease itself. Maybe there's maybe the lease is going to be renewed, or maybe you're entering a new lease, or maybe a tenant is in default and is facing possible eviction and needs to renegotiate with the landlord, and it has some conversation to start with the landlord. Maybe, so here's some tips that hopefully you can walk away with. Subletting within the lease, there's usually provision for subletting. Maybe one way to do this is to remove barriers to allowing the tenant who's in distress to sublet space to another tenant. Or maybe even insert in the lease a provision that allows a tenant to reduce or surrender space if 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line, the tenant realizes that maybe the work at home is really working for its employees and they don't need that physical space anymore. So maybe an agreement by which you can scale back space. How about assignment? Most leases provide that a tenant can assign the lease to a qualified assignee. But the problem with that is tenants are usually still on the hook. So even if an assignee comes in and takes the tenant's space, well, the tenant is still on the hook until the end of that lease term. Here, in a tenant's market, given the COVID-19 problems, maybe a tenant can negotiate that the tenant actually be released if they bring in a qualified replacement tenant.
Eric, if I may, I'm very sorry because I know we started a little bit late, but we want to try to end around 1:45.
Okay.
So I know Keith had mentioned that both your slide deck and Keith's slide decks are going to be made available to people. Is there a concluding maybe message that we can share and then try to hit you both up with a couple of questions?
Great. So actually, I'm nearly done, Jeremy. If I could just say that there's one last term here, a personal guarantee. There's a good guy walkaway clause that we would recommend, and even eliminating personal guarantees for tenants who have been model tenants. Insurance, if you have business interruption insurance, that's a possible way to go. And here's my contact information. Jeremy, thank you for breaking in. It's hard to gauge the time here.
No. Thanks to the both of you. So we encourage people to put questions in the chat box. I'm going to give a bit of a curveball to the presenters because I'm actually going to go off script to ask the both of them a question. Eric, you're very humble, and we know you and USA 500 Clubs for your expertise in co-op law and condo law in New York. And Keith, we've talked about this before, the concept of trust marketing. Right, you brought up, that we're so much focus right now is on safety, okay, and safety first. But we're also, all of us are just in front of our computers, our mobile devices more than ever, and we're looking for trust and thought leaders. And it'd be helpful to share with the people on the practicum, Keith, some thoughts of yours about trust marketing right now. We have so many thought leaders in USA 500 Clubs, how they can tap into trust marketing. And Eric, it'd be great for you to share some examples of how you've been blogging for years, and how continuing with your blogging in your niche area has really, carved you out in USA 500 Clubs and in the New York legal community as a thought leader and trust marketer. Please, Keith.
Sure. So on the trust marketing front, the most impactful tip I think I could offer is the one I mentioned earlier, in that most of you on this call have been doing this forever. That's how you built your business, how you built your pipeline, and so on. So I think there's a real opportunity to go to your, colleague, manufacturer, or retail store, or whatever it might be, one of your clients who don't understand that, they have this adversarial relationship with their employees, and the fact that Dunkin' Donuts employee wasn't wearing the glove, that's not my problem, it's her problem. No, it's his problem. The signal she's putting out is representative of the business, and everybody's looking for that very closely. On the thought leadership thing, it's a great time. We're all at home. We could do webinars. We can do blogging and all these sorts of things. What's actually, I think, happened is the problem is shifted. So as a marketing agency, I've historically sometimes been a challenge for clients to say, do you want to blog? Do you want to do podcasts or videos, things like that? Now clients are very willing, but the problem is it's supply and demand. Everybody's doing it. So, simply blogging or putting a video series out, that's no longer sufficient. You've got to work hard actively to build an audience for that. You go to all this, you put out these video blogs or whatever, or these blogs, and then you have 20 people read them. That's deflating, right? So the technical, the marketing challenge has gone from should we do it, how do we do it, to how do we promote it, how do we get people to subscribe to it, and so on.
Great. And Eric, please, could you share with us your blogging experience, why you think blogging is more important than ever right now?
Thanks, Jeremy. I can't tell you enough how our firm has collectively, we're all in agreement that our attempts to blog and to stay ahead of the curve has really elevated our profile in the biggest, one of the biggest real estate markets in the country, if not the world. We are so focused on staying ahead of the curve. If the governor issues an executive order, we start drafting immediately on how this impacts our clients, and we blast to thousands of people. And we have gotten so much feedback that being ahead of the curve, and this goes to what Keith was saying, how do you promote it? One way of promoting is being ahead of the curve consistently and providing information and materials that is useful, easy to digest, and on point. And that's pretty much, that's how we found our path here to marketing in a very saturated market.
Great, thank you. And so your presentation, you know, the new normal is over. The old normal, excuse me, is over, and the new normal is evolving. You know, Eric, you've been ahead of the curve, and people that are on this practicum, I think that's a real strong message to all of us. Is just embrace the fact, adapt the fact that we're in this new normal, leverage the knowledge that we all have in our professions, and channel that to develop that trusted relationship that we have with our current clients and potential clients. It can really align with marketing firms like Sales Renewal to help us to hone in on that message. And as Keith, as you just said, make sure you get the message out and that you're actually heard and seen. So thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate everybody's time. Please feel free, follow up with Keith, follow up with Eric, follow up with others that are leading these practicums over the next month and a half with USA 500 clubs. We so much appreciate that people take their time out of their days to join us. So thanks to everybody. Thanks especially to Keith and Eric.
Thank you,
Great job,
Jeremy.
you guys.
Thanks all for coming.